Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Malcolm Maestrel and I'm a Membership Services Coordinator with IAAP. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, An Introduction to Standard Accessibility Reporting Inc., SAR. We're very excited to have the Executive Director of SAR, Chris Law, with us today for the presentation. But before we begin, we have a few general housekeeping items to go over. Closed captioning is provided. To enable closed captioning, select the CC icon in the Zoom menu bar. The stream text links for English, French, German, Spanish, and Swedish will be posted in the chat as well. American Sign Language interpretation is also provided. Microphones are muted to prevent any background noise or disruptions, and we will monitor the chat for any dialogue and technical issues. And we ask that all attendees please submit their questions via the Q&A option in the Zoom menu bar. Questions will be saved until the end of the presentation. And today's webinar will be recorded and available in our webinar archives. And a copy of the recording and presentation will be sent to everyone who registered in the post-webinar email. And now I would like to turn the program over to Pina Diantino for an introduction of today's topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malcolm, and welcome everyone. My name is Pina Dintino, and today on behalf of G3ACT and IAAP, I am pleased to moderate this panel with Dr. Chris Law as we speak a little bit about the motivation behind Standards Accessibility Reporting, Inc. I became aware of this great initiative a few years ago and have been working with Chris alongside with a number of great individuals and colleagues to really try to address a problem that we're all facing, and that is, how do we know what it is that we buy is accessible? How do we know as consumers that we can trust what we are seeing as something that someone or something that says that is accessible and is usable for persons with disabilities? So I want to pass the mic to Chris for a few moments for his introduction, and then we'll dive right into this presentation and get to talk a little bit about the drive and motivation of this great organization. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Pina. I started the organization a couple of years ago, but the start of the organization came after a few years of actually discussions amongst people in the accessibility testing field about this need. And actually the need.
Oh no.
Chris, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we've lost him.
Hello, everyone. This is Malcolm again. While we're waiting for... Oh, Chris, it looks like your camera's moving again. Can you hear me?
Just a second. Let me try something that might be causing a problem. I don't know. Let's see. Is that better? Is things okay?
We can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Yeah. So if you can start with,
I was all ready to go to my backup PC. Okay.
Yeah. Can you just give us a little bit of a background on yourself first? Go ahead.
Sure. Sure. So my background, I've been working in the accessibility field since 1993 or so. So a long time. And I've worked in interface design. I've worked in analysis of standards and guidelines for disability access to technology. I did my PhD in Australia, working on how businesses respond to accessibility issues. And then I spent a bunch of time in the US government as a contractor working on products where we had to assess how accessible other people's products were. I also then, once I left the government and started my own company, I ran the ICT Accessibility Testing Symposium for 7 years. It was an annual event just to discuss testing. Yeah.
Great. Tell us a little bit about SAR and how it all began. I know you started to do that, but we were cut off, so I'll ask you to
Sorry
start.
about that. Hopefully we keep the connection here. So about 5 years ago, I started having conversations with colleagues about the problem that we were having from the testing field in terms of nobody knew how accessible things were. And everybody was using their own systems of telling their customers how accessible things were. And this lack of consistency made everybody's job kind of hard. But it especially made the consumer's job extremely hard in trying to figure out whether a product would work for them or not. And it makes people as I'll show you in my presentation, it makes it very difficult for people making purchasing decisions to know whether things are accessible or not. And so we had these discussions, and then when we came out of the pandemic, we decided to actually start a nonprofit. And we are 2 years young, and IAAP became a member of SAR last year, and vice versa. So it's great that we have this partnership.
Great. So now that we have this membership, we have this partnership, and one of the reasons why I think this partnership is important is, as we all know, for those of us who are working with IAAP, we talk a lot about accessibility, we talk a lot about disability inclusion, and we also speak a lot about the fact that what we want to do with organizations, with businesses, with our own communities, we want it to be impactful. We want people to be able, we want to improve the quality of life of individuals in their day-to-day as well. So talk to us a little bit about what drove this vision, a little bit as what started as an example.
Yeah, we share the same sort of goals and vision as IAAP, trying to make things better for people with disabilities, and that's really what it boils down to. I think that it causes a level of frustration amongst some of us. Standards usually start when enough people are frustrated with the current status quo of things not being standardized. So I've got a presentation. If you don't mind, I'll walk through that presentation, and that'll give you a good, thorough introduction to what it is that we're all about. And then after that presentation, we'll come back to some questions again. Okay.
Let's do it.
Very good. Okay. On the screen, we're showing the standard accessibility reporting logo, but we're also showing a prototype of a washing machine with a label affixed to that. And the label says, washed a 5 cubic feet top loader washer, and it's got 3.6 stars out of 5 for accessibility. And then it lists for different disability types, different sub-scores. So like low vision, blindness, deafness, and hearing loss, that sort of thing. So
certainly can relate to that, as I recently had to buy a washing machine that,
yeah,
looking for an accessible washing machine. Go ahead.
Well, you're in the same boat as many other people, as we all know. Grandma, her washing machine died. Okay, so Shelley knows that Grandma has arthritis in her hands, and some things are quite painful for her. So Shelley's offered to help Grandma pick a replacement, and so they're at the big box store, and there's 14 different machines to choose from. So together they're checking out the accessibility labels on each of these machines, and the one represented by this label shown here has a score of 95 for limited reach and strength, and a score of 90 for limited manual dexterity. So this is the most promising of the 14. Okay. So they read the list of features. The machine has soft closed doors. It has an angled tub for easier reach, and it can be filled once every 2 months with an entire bottle of detergent. So for them, this is the winner. For an $800 purchase, the label makes the purchasing process much easier. Okay, so now Ethan is blind, and he knows from past experience that for his screen reader, when he's buying an app from the App Store, he knows from past experience that his interface has basically said, and his screen reader has said, unlabeled button, unlabeled button, unlabeled button. And this is only after he has spent the $1.99. And he knows that the process to try to get that money back after spending that $1.99 is a ton of hassle in terms of time and frustration. So it's not really worth it. So Ethan is thankful now that there's an accessibility score on apps. Okay, this one is 4.8 for the accessibility score, represented by 5 stars, and 4.2 out of 5 stars represented for the general user rating. It also says that it's a verified accessibility score, so the likelihood that everything is coded correctly is quite high. So again, this looks like a winner. It's now an easy $1.99 purchasing decision. Sanjay now is buying a new media streaming player on what looks to be, I've got it blurred out, but it looks to be a popular online shopping site that many of you may know. But Sanjay is deaf, and his partner is hard of hearing, is not hard of hearing. His partner is hearing. Sanjay's research up to this point, he already knows that if you want to achieve the highest score on accessibility, you need to be able to switch captions on and off with a maximum of 2 steps. Now, the media player that he's trying to replace, you have to go into the menu, you have to go into the settings, you have to find the caption setting, turn on the captions, hit confirm. And then every time his partner wants to watch something without him, they have to go through the entire sequence again just to turn the captions off. So Sanjay wants to consider only media players that are rated 4 stars and up for accessibility. And on our screen here, we've got consumer reviews that you can filter by the number of stars, and accessibility score that you can also filter by the number of stars. And then Sanjay wants to have the results filtered by the deafness and hearing loss scores, because that's what's of most interest to him. So picking a winner for this $100 purchase is a lot easier than it was before. Last example. Tracy doesn't have any disabilities, but Tracy works as a procurement officer in a government department looking to spend around $12 million on their next CMS contract. So as part of their procurement process, each vendor is obliged to send a ACR or VPAT accessibility report, along with their recent requirement that they've added, which is to include standardized score numbers. Now, Tracy has been around long enough to remember the day when there were no such thing as standard scores. You had to either wade through 80 pages to find out whether the thing was going to work for your agency, or you just didn't actually know and you figured, well, it's got a VPAT, it must be accessible. Now things are so much easier. Looking at the 4 options here, we have 4 different VPAT cover sheets on the screen. Okay. The 4th one on the far right from Tyrell Corporation, well, firstly, they don't even have a standardized score. They gave themselves an A+, and they said it's extremely good for accessibility. So they haven't used the standard star rating, and the label isn't even the right color. It isn't even in the required top right corner of the page. So they made up their own scoring system. they're out. Scribble that one out. Tracy's agency also has a rule that anything less than 3.0 on the 5-point scale is not considered to be accessible. So the second one to be eliminated from our list is the second one along, all safe. Their score was 1.8 for accessibility. They're out too. So it's now between NCOM, who have an accessibility score of 3.1, and Fusion Industries, and they have 4.7 as their accessibility score. It also says that it's verified as well. So Fusion Industries is the winner in terms of the most accessible choice. Okay, you can send these 4 things on to the next step in the procurement process. But here's our answer for accessibility for where our $12 million should go. Fusion Industries, most accessible. NCOM, second place. All safe, not accessible. Tyrell Corporation failed to supply the requested information. Okay, so this is an imagined future. What are the accessibility professionals going to be doing in this imagined future? So my background image that is on screen here is of the current IAAP home page grayed out, and I'll overlay some of the previous slides that I've done as I talk through this slide. Okay, so accessibility professionals, what are they doing? Sorry. Okay. So here's our label again. Firstly, accessibility professionals are helping big box appliance manufacturers to design more accessible interfaces, helping to test, helping to improve their scores, helping their marketing campaigns. After all, the market wants to know who's winning. And by the way, the losing companies, they're all scrambling, trying to find professionals who can help them make their technologies accessible. Okay, maybe they're looking to IAAP members who know a lot about consumer product interface design. Maybe that's you. Okay. Secondly, accessibility professionals are learning about standard accessibility reporting because it's part of the CPAC, CPWA, the WAS certification tests. They're then using these certified skills to help app development teams pass accessibility tests with flying colors every time. Thirdly, accessibility professionals in government, well, they're busy helping their colleagues throughout the entire agency with implementing accessibility programs. They're using resources such as the IAAP DI&A program. They're doing this because they're sure as hell not spending their time wading through 80-page VPAT reports to try to find out whether something was accessible or not. Those days are over. Those days were absurd. Thank goodness those days are over. So, I have to tell you, the old days were crap. But we are still stuck currently in the old days. The old days is right now. The old days is today. Let's be optimistic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Christopher, when you say the old days are gone, today is the old days. So I want to take you back a little bit, maybe to move this a little bit along.
Sure.
So we're looking at, as you mentioned, standards have existed for a long time. We have standards for digital, as WCAG, for instance, and EN 301 and so on. Manufacturers also have standards that they need to follow, same as built and whatnot. So how will this project make things different? Because, I mean, if people are following these standards, they should be accessible, right?
Right. We have standards for the requirements of what the interface should do. And those are on element by element basis for WCAG. But there's no way to currently, there's no industry consensus way currently that wraps all of those up into a overall score that everyone can agree on. That's the difference. Yes, there are standards. There's been a lot of work. I don't mean to suggest that people haven't been doing their work. People are, including myself, yourself, Pina, we've all been working to try to make a more accessible world. Now, the problem is, how do you tell the customers? So that's my next point here, right? And let's look forward now. Okay.
Okay.
So yes, the difference is about reporting versus the actual requirements. So a little quote from Billy Joel here from his song Keeping the Faith. The good old days weren't always good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. Okay, so tomorrow really isn't as bad as it seems. We're focusing at SAR on making a better tomorrow. Okay, we're all used to seeing scores all over the place. Not for accessibility, but we're used to seeing scores all over the place, standardized scores. So here is from a popular review site. You've got two choices. You've got two options to choose from. You've got one product that is rated 4.5 stars and has 33,000 reviews, or you've got 4 stars from 27 reviews. Well, one has a higher score and way, way, way more reviews, so it's probably more reliable. Next one is probably from a British site. Maybe somebody's buying a car or something like this. One car maybe rated 4.5 stars, 21,500 pounds, and the other one is rated 3 stars and 25,000 pounds. So one is rated lower, costs more. Well, which one am I going to choose? Okay. Here we have 2 washing machines side by side. One is rated 79 as an overall score for consumer satisfaction, and one is rated 64. So which one is the better one? Well, it's the one that's 79. That's just the easy choice. Okay. So we're used to seeing these, but we don't have a common score for accessibility, and that's what we need to change. Here on the screen, I've got an image of Lady Liberty. The law is not coming to save us. Okay, there's no laws on the horizon that will demand accessible washing machines. And even if they were on the horizon, how many decades do you think it's going to take to implement that and then enforce that law? There's no law on the horizon that will demand standardized scores on VPATs and ACRs because such a scoring system does not exist. You can't have a requirement to have something that doesn't exist.
So Christopher, one of our colleagues is asking, where do we get these standards, right? So that they can be used for consumers. And I guess the answer to that is that these standards today are non-existent, correct?
Non-existent. That's why we formed an organization, in order to create
exactly.
them.
So let's talk about...
We did look around to see if other organizations were going to create such standards, and nobody was. So we decided, oh, okay, well, we've got to do it ourselves. Yep.
So I think the next question or lead to, so how do we do this? How do we develop these standards, and what, how do people get engaged in this, and so that we can in fact start talking about them more and applying them more?
Yes, we need to motivate both consumers and industry that it's in their best interest that these standards come to be. Okay. So here's the best example that I like to share with folks is from the car industry, right? This was from the very first meeting we had. I said, let's look towards the car industry because they've had to do the same sort of thing. So here, I've got an image of a car. And the question is, would you like to buy this car? So you're shopping for the needs of your family. The car is within your budget. big enough for 5 people. You may even think it looks nice. But then in the course of your research, you find out that this car has a 2 out of 5 star government safety crash test score. 2 out of 5 scores, 4. So here I've got an image of that same car in the crash test, and why it scored 2.5 stars is because when they crashed it into a wall at 50 miles an hour, the whole front end was pancaked in. Okay, no one's walking away from this crash. Okay, so you say to yourself, no, I'm not buying that car. I'm on to the next one. So what do you think that the manufacturer did when they saw this score? Do you think that they popped champagne corks, or did somebody get fired? It's more likely the latter. So look, today, almost every car commercial on TV mentions safety. They brag about how safe their cars are. They quote the government crash test ratings because they're all getting 4s and 5s because they've realized that that's important to people. It's pretty bad to hand a 2 out of 5 score to a marketing department. Marketing drives sales, sales drives innovation and work. So it's really about how do we motivate people? And we're really trying to motivate people to say, look, you want to be the winners. Okay. So the companies that like to have standards are those that are making things good for consumers. Accessibility should be no different. Okay. We all need to know who's winning. The image that's on screen here is a montage of winning sports teams, right? Winning their championships. Competition is the big motivator. You have to put the work in, okay? And you can't really demand the best out of anybody. We can't demand the best out of any manufacturer if we don't know what the scoring system is. Because with a scoring system, you can't tell who's the best. You can't have a football game where nobody is in agreement on what constitutes a goal or a touchdown. Okay. So as accessibility professionals, we need a means to identify winning companies. Okay. And of course, if you have winners, you also have losers, right? So this image is a montage of all the losing teams at the end of that championship game with their heads in their hands. Okay. So those who didn't put in quite enough effort, those who talked a big game, who said that they had 100% accessible, but weren't really, okay? How do we identify the losing companies in the world of accessibility? We need those scores. That will drive everybody up. Okay, that's what standardization can do.
So I think we have an agreement that accessibility today is and creates a marketing advantage to manufacturers, to companies. I think we can agree about that. We also can agree that if we look at the population today, we have 1/4 of the population discloses a disability. Plus, we have aging, which brings on disabilities. So, from a consumer perspective, I think there is an appetite, there is a need to address accessibility and make sure that products are. People want to know. People want to know before they engage how they're going to spend their money. So I guess my question to you as we move into this organization is, how do people get engaged? How do we move this forward? So we talk about perhaps a group of people coming together to create different standards or requirements based on a product or based on a platform. How do you see this happening?
Sure. Well, I think it happens through membership. And it just so happens I've got a slide just on that very topic to share. So how do people do this? So we've got to go from there's no standard to there's a standard. How do we do that? So we formed a nonprofit member organization, SAR. There are benefits for membership, and there are some small fees involved. Okay. So the benefits, the first benefit is that you have the option as a member to participate in standards development teams. So we're going to be we are forming a team that is creating the label, and then the label is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Because you need all the elements underneath that label that enable the testing professionals and others to generate a reliable, valid score. But we also need to decide what's on the label, right? So you can participate in those teams as a member. Okay. Every member also gets to use prototypes that are generated throughout development. The rest of the world won't see these prototypes. It will only be the members get to see these, and it enables you to see whether this particular scoring system works with your current testing system. And then if not, what are the problems that we need to know about, the rest of the team needs to know about, or what is it that you need to adjust? So maybe you've been working on a system that had A, B, C, D as your scoring system. Now you've got to use a STAR scoring system. That might be an example. So, and then how do you translate that over? Okay. The next benefit is really preparation. So there's going to be a day when the standards are there. And so as a member, you get to prepare and think about, well, how would you use this knowledge that you have of how to implement this standard to provide a better service for your customers? So you can say to your customers, look, you want to be doing the best you can on accessibility. Here's the way that you can do it, and you can state it publicly. Okay. And then finally, you get to vote. Okay, you get to vote as this is what an industry consensus standard is the membership gets together at the end of the process and they vote, do we adopt this as a standard or not? That's what members can do. You can also vote for your leadership. You can also vote for the project choices that we do. We have an annual plan every year where the membership gets to vote and input on what it is that we're going to work on. Okay. I mentioned that there were some fees. Let me just go over the fees, Pina, then we'll get back to your question. Just to let you know what those fees are. If you're an individual, we have a $100 a year membership. If you want to upgrade that to a professional voting membership, it's an additional $100. As an organization, it's $400, but that $400 covers your entire organization. So all of your employees, you'd be able to send those employees to meetings and to any of, if you have a tester that could help in standards development, and you've got a marketing team, and you think of somebody and say, oh, they could probably help in marketing and outreach. They could help out there as well. So really, it's for everybody in your organization. And then we have strategic partnerships. IAAP is a strategic partner. Our strategic partnerships start at $500 a year for a nonprofit, and they max out at $10,000 a year. But it's really $1,000 to $10,000 for a for-profit company based off of annual revenue, that sort of thing. Pina, you had another question.
Well, I think I just wanted to clarify something. I think it's important for people to from what I'm understanding and from our discussions, is that this is not about creating new standards per se. So we have WCAGs, we have, as I mentioned before, we have built environment standards, we have manufacturer standards, correct? If I understand you correctly. Yeah. But it's really about creating a manner, a label, or a sort of a standard reporting. And that's the key word here, is the reporting that consumers can actually understand and use. And while there is potentially, let's say a 1 to 5 score, and that it may be an amalgamation of a number of disabilities, I think what I heard is that there would also be kind of a breakdown to sort of say how accessible this particular product is based on different types of disabilities. Is that correct?
Yes. So the way we envisage it, and nothing is set in stone, but the way we envisage it is um, that there's an overall score, right? So if we go back to the car crash test analogy, there's an
Mm-hmm.
overall score. You get 1 to 5 stars. That's it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, because a consumer is making their mind up on a whole host of different things. And they don't want to be handed a book that says, this is all the crash tests that we did. We did actually 8 different crash tests. There was a rollover, there was a front impact, there was a rear impact, there was a side impact. And these were the individual scores that related to those different things. Most consumers don't care about that. They just want to know, well, 4 stars, fairly safe, 5 stars, 5 stars, really safe. In the same way that most consumers would think, 4 stars, pretty accessible. 5 stars, really accessible. But the accessibility is different in that you then have, okay, well, I'm blind, and my colleague here is, uh, yeah, for those on the call, I'm personally not blind. Um, but in this scenario, I'm blind, so maybe I'm really concerned about those features that relate to myself. And my colleague is deaf, and she really cares about the features that are to do with deafness. So you got to have a sort of individual system to say, is it a pass or fail under those categories, or is it a numerical scoring system like we showed on that prototype to make that choice for yourself? But the other alternative, because the alternative is to say for without a standardized score, the alternative is just marketing, where people just say, yeah, it's accessible. It's really good for accessibility. We're the best. Okay, great, but does it work for me? Well, it's accessible. How do I
And I think
know?
I,
So yeah,
and I and I think as a community, we're starting to see a lot of these quote unquote badges or stickers that kind of say, "Hey, I'm an accessible company. I'm an inclusive company." Blah 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 blah. And so you kind of now you really wonder what does that mean when a company or a product kind of says. So we don't want to fall into that trap for sure. I do know, Chris, that we have a number of great questions, and I wonder if we should just take a little break and just go to the questions, or do
sure.
you still have a lot to cover in your slides?
No, that's fine. Let's take some questions.
Let's do the questions. Okay. I believe, Malcolm, you're monitoring the questions.
Yes, thank you, Pina. So, we've got a number of questions in the Q&A already, some that we've touched on a little bit already, but I think a good starting point is this question from one of our attendees. Pina mentioned she had to buy a new washer and dryer and found challenges with finding accessible ones. Could you please elaborate on your experience, and have you found other appliances such as air fryers, ovens, etc., that were accessible?
That's questions for me. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, that was quite the journey for me. I have not found a washer or a dryer that is accessible that meets my needs. I ended up landing on something that, I can work with at a minimum. What I find with a lot of these manufacturers today is that they create apps that will interface with your home appliances, right? Which then means that every single time you have to walk around with your phone, or your Google Home or whatnot to try and access these things to some greater degree, right? Which I don't know about you guys, but if I'm cooking or baking or whatnot, operating my iPhone to tell me how to, to tell it how to set this and do that becomes quite cumbersome. Simple things as, having buttons on appliances, that's all going away. With, it's all being replaced by flat screens. But, take people with dexterities or people that are aging, buttons are very helpful, useful as an example. So I think it's really important to really recognize when, a manufacturer says it's accessible, is it really accessible if you can only access it through an app? And I think that, to me, is one of the things we're trying to address. I would have loved to know, what do you mean by accessible? Well, what accessible features exist? And I think that's really important. I think of I was thinking about this very quickly this morning. I go to my bank and I can stick a headset in my bank teller machine, and it will give me directions. It will tell me how to do what I need to do. We don't have that in home appliances, so it's really difficult. So I'm going to pass it back to you guys.
Thank you. Uh, Before we go on to the next question, Chris, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Pina covered that pretty well. I mean, and that's one of our questions that we have to ask is like when we're scoring and you have if you have a manufacturer that has a fully accessible app to a washing machine that doesn't have buttons that work, if you're blind and you don't have the app open, um, how do you score that? Yeah, we need to answer those questions. Yeah.
Thank you. And that kind of leads into our next question, which you both touched on a little bit during the presentation already, but maybe we could expand on the specifics a little bit. And it's asking about the variations in disabilities and how that would affect the rating or scoring. So, what do you think of the variations in disability needs? Let's say washing machine is fully accessible for hearing impaired, but at the same time not accessible for blind. Wouldn't we be
Yeah.
misleading the hearing impaired customer if we just give a general mark for
Sure.
accessibility? And they're wondering
Sure.
about the challenges and the variability this poses.
Yeah, exactly. This is the sort of question again that needs to be resolved, right? So if you think about the list of work ag requirements, and you've got a large number that cover visual disabilities and a small number that cover, say, hearing disabilities, right? Relatively. And so you could end up with a really good score and exclude a disability group quite easily. Well, if you've got a really good overall score, but you've excluded a group, well, what does that mean? What do we then do with that uh, as a on our label and our scoring system? So we could say, look, it's got high scores for visual and low scores for hearing, right? Well, the consumer wants to know that. But then the question that comes to my mind is, well, for a manufacturer, could they reach 5 stars, right, with the equivalent of that score? I would say no. I would say you can max out at 4 stars, or maybe you max out at 3.5 stars, or 3 stars even, if you've fully excluded one group. But that's just my opinion. We have to work through that process. We have to come together and vote on what makes sense in that translation of
Yeah, and it sounds
individual
to
scores
me
to our overall. Yeah,
Yeah, and it sounds to me like the people who are going to participate in developing these scores, we hope that it is the community. There's going to be a lot of participation from the manufacturers, but we need the community with different types of disability to join this organization and work on these standards to make sure that we don't leave anybody out, or we try not to leave anybody out. I think the key here, from what I gather, is there's going to be a real dire need. If the community wants this, the community needs to be engaged. Malcolm?
Thank you. And moving on to our next question. This is kind of a two-parter. You touched on a little bit, or a lot throughout this presentation about how you're developing these standards. So how soon do you think an SAR score would be available? And then who would do the testing, kind of both in the creation and then once the uh, standards are out there?
Sure, I can answer that. If you've ever been on any sort of volunteer committee, um, you get together at the beginning and you say, who's here, who showed up, and who's got the various skills and the time in order to do this work. So if a company sends you as a member to this group and you come back and you say, well, I'm working on this standard and they want to do X, Y, and Z, and I think I could do this and it would take this amount of time. So all of those conversations basically take place. And then you say to yourself, well, how long is this going to take? Uh, we are a new organization. We started with trying to form members in our first year and build up a membership. Um, in the same way that IAAP did, right? So IAAP is around about 10 years old now. And if you look at the IAAP website, first year, 31 organizational members. That's really about what we have ended up with. But we've just come out of our second year, so we're still really small. IAAP's membership now, it's 240 organizational members. Okay, so massive improvement over the course of 10 years. But what can you do with the resources with 240 organizational members? You can do quite a lot, right? What can we do with 30? What could IAAP do in its first couple of years? It was very small. It was those types of engagements. So it's a long way of saying the people that show up, the people that become members, the more we have, the more input we have, the more funds we can raise by our education and outreach efforts that we are beginning, so that we're going to be doing a social media campaign to tell the public about this, and we're going to try to fundraise, and those funds can help in standards development projects. So, for example, if we wanted to run a usability testing study on how the label is received, and we wanted to pay somebody for that, well, we need to raise the funds in order to do that. Or we have members volunteer to do that, and it goes at member volunteer speed. So how long would it take? We want it to be as soon as possible. We want it to be yesterday. But we're just going to have to work through it with what we got.
Thank you. We have a raised hand, I think, for someone who can't use the chat. Malcolm? Toby?
Yes,
I
hi,
don't.
Toby, I
Uh,
see you have your hand raised. Do you have a question or you experience a technical issue? I think,
Can we
right.
unmute him? Yeah.
sure.
I don't think that's.
Or Toby, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
There you go, Toby. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Toby.
First of all, I apologize that I'm a little bit late from another meeting joining. The question I had is, for this group to get traction, is there an opportunity, just the same way like the FCC has a disability advisory committee, is there like a Consumer Protection Bureau where they have a similar thing so that there could be funding and support to help with this effort? Because I think this effort is, truly outstanding, and it's about consumer products. And I'm just kind of wondering if through some of those entities, if there's a way to get traction. I don't know. Question for you.
I think it would be terrific if that were the case. I can tell you that we have chatted with people in the federal government, at least, um, that would it would be good to have their support, their interest, their participation, and the polite way to say it would be that they're considering their options right now.
Sorry, I'm reading the captioning. Okay. So you're saying they are being polite to you, saying that they're considering their options? I'm just making sure I get that correctly.
Yes, yes, that's correct. We've reached out to government, in terms of Consumer Protection Bureau, right? So, um, for example, you may have seen the discussion thread over the last couple of years about overlays and whether overlay manufacturers can say that one line of code makes something 100% accessible. So, in relation to that, you can reach out to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and say, look, there's a bunch of companies that are lying, right? Well, you would think that the government being the government, you could just pick up the phone and ask or send an email message and ask, and that you would get a response. You would think. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, no worries. I was just trying to find out, as I heard you talk about funding,
Yeah,
Mhm.
just didn't know if that was an
sure.
opportunity.
We
Yeah,
are not going, we are not looking to the government to fund this, and we're not looking for government grants currently. We are looking for the public to support this, and then for industry to support this, and especially industry that would stand to benefit. We mentioned the winners. There are companies out there that are spending a fortune on their accessibility programs. But again, in terms of their marketing, all they've got to go on is we're the best at accessibility. Trust us. That's what it really boils down to. So yeah,
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 and I think there's been movement, particularly when we talk about digital accessibility. We have, as we said, the standards like WCAG have been around for a long time. People think that this is what it is, but every company reports their accessibility compliance against the EN 301 or WCAG differently, and so from a consumer perspective, even just that, how do you rate when something is, how do you know that something is really accessible quickly without, going through the whole painstaking process, I think, of finding it out on your own as you're halfway through buying something online or whatnot, right? I think that's part of the conversation here. Um, I,
Thank you.
I know we're running out of time, but Malcolm, you're keeping us on check, yeah?
Yeah,
We,
so we've got about 8 minutes until the top of the hour, and thank you for that reminder as well. I want to be conscious of the time we have left in the presentation. So, Chris, is there anything you wanted to add as we kind of begin to wrap up
sure,
the presentation, and then we'll see if we have time for maybe one more question after that.
sure,
And I know that
sure.
on one of the upcoming slides, you're going to mention the
Yeah,
upcoming
I
open
will bring that
meeting.
slide up now.
So I'll put
We
that
should have that.
question or
Yeah,
that the link to that meeting in the chat. And we've got a lot of questions in the Q&A, and
sure, sure.
people
So
may
let
be
me
able
say
to.
first off, we are here to answer the questions, and we are here to promote participation and that sort of thing. So to that end, if we don't get to questions in the session here, you can always email me directly. Our website, standardari.org, it's easy to contact me and send those questions in. Um, or if Malcolm, you can send those questions, I can address those. Um, I also will accept one-on-one meeting requests. We have a thing on our contact us page that says, could I just set up a meeting just to ask you more questions about this? Absolutely. For prospective members, happy to answer questions. In addition, so uh, depending on what role you as the attendee are here, you may be an accessibility tester, and but really this taps into marketing for your company, right? So this might be of interest. Membership might be of interest to your marketing team and your sales team. So if you would like to send people to another meeting, SAR will hold an open meeting exactly 1 week from today, So it'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, September 25th for 90 minutes. Pre-registration is required. Malcolm is going to put the link in the chat, but there's also a QR code. If you just want to point your phone at the QR code right now, you'll have the link to register for that meeting. During that meeting, we're going to talk about the specific projects that we're working on in terms of standards development and education and outreach. And we'll walk through each of our project areas so that people that are attending, so if you send your personnel, such as your technical personnel, your testers, your management, marketing, sales, if you send them, we'll walk through what it is that we're doing. We'll do a brief overview again as a recap, but we really want to get into the details of what those things are and answer any questions that people have. Because when it comes down to it, in terms of participation in this, you do need to be a member in order to participate in our work. We also do have a newsletter, and we have a option to get the the professional supplement for the newsletter. So you can go to our website and just sign up for the newsletter just to sort of keep in touch. And when we create new content, post new things on social media, we will let people know about that through our newsletter. And then also there's a quarterly update that goes out. And the quarterly update for this month will be due within the next week or so. Okay. Yeah. So during that meeting, we'll answer several. There'll be a more extended opportunity for more questions. But again, happy to answer a few questions now if you think we have a few minutes. Malcolm?
I think we have time for one more quick question. There's about 2 minutes left. So quickly, hello and thank you for this fascinating presentation. Do you think that a scoring system can be generalized internationally? And if so, how many years do you think it will be before it can be used? Here in France, I think it could really speed up the transition to better accessibility.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have members in Poland right now. We have members in Australia. So yeah, so international. Pina is from Canada. So
Absolutely.
yes, so yes, we are doing this without regard for borders, as it were. So this is an international effort. Yes. International participation. Will it work for the systems that are there and in place and being used in Europe? We need our members to show up and tell us that, and to be able to work through those questions.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Chris. I think as we wrap up the last minute on this, I want to just say thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you, Chris, for great information that you've provided. As next steps, I think most of you know that the work that we're doing with IAAP is always about trying to, as we said, improve and understand the user experience, understand how we can measure that user experience. I think this project may lend itself well to sort of help us understand some of that as we move forward with some of our programs. So I do invite you all to check out the standards website, standards reporting website, and reach out to Chris for more questions or myself when it comes to IAAP. So once again, thank you all.
Thank you very much, Chris and Pina. And I went ahead and put that link to the SAR contact page in the chat as well. And once again, I just want to thank you for such a great presentation. It was lovely to see so many questions in the chat.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank our ASL interpreters, Beth and Tammy, and our captioner, Kelly, for their wonderful work as always. And coming up tomorrow, we have a built environment series webinar, Meaningful Accessibility in Built Environments. Then coming up next week, we have an IAAP EU event that's celebrating the Web Accessibility Directive 4th anniversary. And on-site registration has reached capacity, but we are encouraging people to register as virtual attendees. And then coming up on October 3rd, we also have the opportunities and risks of AI in higher education, and that is part of our higher education webinar series. So for those who are not yet a member of IAAP, we welcome you to join our network of over 6,500 accessibility professionals in over 100 countries. All IAAP members get complimentary access to live professional education webinars, as well as our library of archived webinars, access to our Connections networking platform, free courses, and more. And anyone who's interested can sign up at accessibilityassociation.org or email info@accessibilityassociation.org to see how you can become an IAAP member today. Once again, thank you to everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Malcolm. Cheers.
Thanks.